Hey, welcome everybody to Spirituality Adventures. We're glad you're tuning into this episode. We are a viewer and listener supported podcast, so we really appreciate you listening, watching on YouTube. We really encourage you to subscribe to whatever platform you're using. If you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, or if you're on Apple or however you listen to a podcast, be sure and subscribe. We greatly appreciate it. Also, make comments if you like it and share it if you like it. We really need people to make comments and share the episodes that you like. And then also, if you're not already a supporter, we really would encourage you to go to spiritualityadventures.com and you can pick a tier, and we have bonus content for every type of giver. This is a nonprofit, so they're tax-deductible donations, but we do provide bonus content for those who are supporters. So be a part of the team, help support Spirituality Adventures, and we're so glad you're tuning into this episode. Hey, welcome everybody to Spirituality Adventures. Thanks for tuning into this episode. I am delighted to introduce to those of you who don't know Dr. John Sanders. I was aware of his writing and theology throughout the last few decades, actually. I remember reading Clark Pinnock and John Sanders on open theism topics, and I actually loved it when I read it. I was never really fighting too much against it, and but I found out that not everybody felt that way about all the books that John has written. In fact, it even caused an enormous amount of controversy in the evangelical community. And so I want to start, John. Thank you, John, for being on here. We just met in person a couple of weeks ago out in Wyoming at an open relational theology conference that Tom Ord puts on. And so I was delighted to meet you, and I've appreciated your work through the years. So it was so fun to meet you in person. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Glad to be here. Glad to have met you out there in that venue.
Yeah. Beautiful setting, right? I also found out you love the outdoors and nature and hiking and fishing, all kinds of stuff. So I was like, that even made you more dear to my heart. So, but yeah, let's start. I always like to get a little origin story, just a couple of minutes on, where you grew up and like your family of origin, your faith background, and particularly how you decided to get into theology. And was that a calling? How did that happen?
So growing up, we attended the United Methodist Church in a small farming community in central Illinois. So sweet corn and soybeans. Just fields and fields and fields of that is where I grew up.
Wow.
I wasn't very interested in religion and Christianity growing up. And then had a classic evangelical late adolescent conversion experience. I mean, just the classic all the way. And didn't realize it at the time, and kind of joined a fundamentalist Baptist church, and then kind of conservative evangelicalism in college. And I went to Bible college. I decided I wanted to learn more about this stuff, so I went to Bible college.
Where did you go?
Pardon?
Where'd you go to Bible college?
So it's a small school it's now called Oak Hills Christian College in northern Minnesota. It has about 100 students, very small.
Okay.
And while I was there, I read a book by best-selling author J.I. Packer. At the time, he's deceased now, but his book, Knowing God, and everybody was reading it, and so I read it. And in there, he says, quote, he says, "I know that there are passages in the Bible that seem to suggest that God responds to our prayers. But God doesn't respond. God is in control of everything." And I read that, and set the book down and thought to myself, either Packer is wrong about that, or the way I've been taught to pray is wrong. They both can't be right. I'm not sure which position is correct here, but I'm going to find out.
Hmm.
And I went to one of my professors at the Bible college, and he listened to me for a while. And then he said, John, have you ever considered the influence of Greek philosophy upon Christian theology?
Wow.
No.
Ah, interesting.
And he said, quote, perhaps you should. That
Yeah,
was the end of his statement. He just sent me to the library.
that's so fascinating. I didn't bump into that critique till I was reading Abraham Joshua Heschel,
Yeah, yeah,
Years,
yeah.
I mean,
Oh,
not that long,
Heschel.
not even
So
less than 15 years ago, so.
yeah, so Heschel was 4 years later for me when I went to a liberal arts college and got introduced to Heschel. And by that time, I had already been doing some research of my own and really resonated with Heschel.
Hmm.
I mean, Heschel was way ahead of me. Don't get me wrong, but just I didn't encounter him until.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and I concluded that Packer was wrong, that his theological determinism was incorrect, his classical theism was incorrect, but I didn't know exactly what I believed yet.
Hmm.
What I was on a road, but I didn't know where it was going. And um, my undergraduate, when I transferred to a liberal arts college in Chicago, uh, my professors were just really helpful in putting me on, uh, actually, to quite a few different Jewish authors. Uh, one of whom was Heschel. Um, and I was a philosophy undergrad major and reading and just starting to critique evangelical theology because it was so, in my opinion, tied to what, for your viewers, I'll call Enlightenment philosophy. I won't go into, if you want to go into it, I can go into it. But the idea that we can have a strong foundation, it's called strong foundationalism. You're absolutely certain beginning point.
Hmm.
And then you build on that. Everything is absolutely certain.
Hmm.
And then you arrive at this certain position. And so in evangelicalism, it was, if you were to die tonight, do you know where you would spend eternity? And if you said, well, you don't know it, it's not certain, you're not adamant about it. And I was reading Wittgenstein and Michael Polanyi, a Czechoslovakian scientist who turned philosopher, and many others. And I just realized that this whole evangelical approach was so tied to John Locke and Descartes and other famous thinkers that I think went off the rails. I think the Enlightenment approach was deeply problematic. And that's why you had inerrancy. So when I went to my first year in seminary was at Trinity Evangelical Divinity School in Chicago. And that was in the 70s. And inerrancy was the topic. In fact, the International Council on Inerrancy was held at that divinity school while I was a student there. And so I got to
That was
attend it.
the that was came out in 1979, if I'm
Yeah.
correct, right?
Yeah.
That classic statement
Right.
on
Yep.
inerrancy, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm
Which
sitting
I
there and
think is ironic because it's all based on the original manuscripts, which we don't have.
right,
And I'm
right.
just
Yes.
like, I remember reading that when I was,
Yeah.
studying myself, and I was like, okay, well, this is an argument that doesn't matter because we don't even
Right.
have the original manuscripts. But
Yeah. And then all
it,
the nuances about what constitutes an error.
yes, it's detailed.
And I just, I didn't agree with it. And I was a black sheep at Trinity. I asked
Yeah.
all the wrong questions in class.
Wow.
I would ask a question. I won't mention names of professors here, but
Some of
like
them are dead and some of them are still alive, I bet, right?
yes.
Uh,
So one professor in theology class asked a question about hell, and he was a Harvard PhD, and I didn't understand his answer at all. And I thought, well, I'm just not smart enough to know what he's talking about. And as we're leaving the room, he says, John, come here, come here. Takes me into his office, shuts the door. He says, you nailed it right on the head. And I'm like, well, he said, that's the weakest point of the Evangelical Free Church statement of faith. And I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, why did he say that in class?
Because he'd signed a document.
Yes.
That he, you
And
understand,
then,
you know how that works better than anybody.
yeah. And then the hermeneutics class I took, who was my advisor, I was an Old Testament major at the time, and my advisor was teaching biblical hermeneutics. And we were reading E.D. Hirsch, Validity, his book called Validity of Interpretation. And you take these steps and you have the correct interpretation of every passage of the Bible. And I'm like, this doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And he's my advisor.
Mm-hmm.
So in hermeneutics class, so I'll keep this story somewhat short here. So he taught us a method called grammatical syntactical analysis. You analyze the Hebrew or Greek grammar, then the syntax, the surrounding contextual syntactical structure of language. And when you do that in Hebrew or Greek, you arrive at the correct interpretation of the text. So I raised my hand and I said, Dr. K, are you saying that we will have the meaning, the whole meaning, and nothing but the meaning, so help our grammatical syntactical analysis?
Whoa.
And he paused and he smiled and he said, yes. I raised my hand again, Dr. K. So why is it that you and Dr. McComiskey teach in the same Old Testament department here, and both of you use the same grammatical syntactical analysis? But on a couple of key passages of the Old Testament, you and Dr. McComiskey disagree.
Right.
And he's got a big grin on his face. He was a very smart guy, very smart. And he said, John, that's an easy one. Depravity. The, the class just erupted with laughter. I mean, it was a great retort. I raised my hand a third time. He wouldn't call on me.
I was going to say, who's more depraved, you or him?
So after class, I said, Dr. K, you didn't shoot your method in the foot. You shot it in the head. This is why you never wanted me as your student. Okay. This is my advisor I'm talking to. I said, you didn't shoot your method in the foot. You shot it in the head. Which one of you is depraved? And actually, of course, both of you are depraved. So neither of you arrive at the absolute interpretation of the text.
Oh my God.
And he said, well, that's right. And I said, well, why don't you say that in class? And his answer was immediate. He said, because I don't want them becoming liberals. And I said, but you just set them up.
Yeah.
You've taught them it's either absolute total relativism or total certainty.
Yeah.
Those are your only two options.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
You know, and the rabbis would come up with 20 different answers and then let you decide.
Yeah. Well, if you read the Talmud, the Talmud has like a passage of scripture, and then around it is all the famous rabbinic and rabbis who interpreted that passage, and just they're conversing with each other over centuries.
Yeah, and they don't agree.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so funny. Wow. So I want to talk about two of your books.
Okay.
How many books have you written, John?
I've authored or edited 11.
11. So the two that I want to talk about today, those of you who are watching, I'm holding up The God Who Risks and then Embracing Prodigals. And I actually had read The God Who Risks years ago, but I have a huge library down here around me, 9,000 books, and some of them are in boxes. That's ridiculous.
Wow.
I'm a book junkie. Anyway, but reading these two again back to back was so much fun, and so things. But before we jump into those, because what you have in those two books caused quite a bit of controversy in evangelical circles as you emerged into your career as primarily a seminary professor, right?
No, I taught at liberal arts colleges.
Okay. So you weren't in the seminary world, you were in the university world. Okay. Yep. And Hendrix is where you taught most of your career?
Um, the last 14 or 16 years, yeah, I taught at Hendrix College, which is a Methodist affiliated school in Central Arkansas.
Okay. Okay. So, but you were a part of uh, ETS,
Yes.
Eton
So at first,
Evangelical Theology
I taught at
Society.
a Bible college for 16 years, and then I taught at an evangelical liberal arts college for 6 years.
Okay. But give us just the little short snippet of the
Yeah.
controversy that you and Clark Pinnock
Yeah.
created in ETS and how that
Yeah.
came to a vote whether to let you stay in or not. I thought that
Yeah.
was
So
fascinating.
one of my former professors at Trinity Divinity School was Norman Geisler,
Mm-hmm.
and I had him for two classes.
Mm.
And so I respected him.
Apologetic, a very influential evangelical apologist.
Yes, yes. And so Pinnock and I were writing about the openness of the model called the openness of God. So very briefly, that's God is open to us and the future is open. It's not a closed, settled fact. It's multiple possible futures. And the leaders, Norman Geisler and Roger Nicole, who Nicole was a founding member of the Evangelical Theological Society, the ETS, and they said Pinnock and Sanders cannot possibly agree with the statement. The only statement to belong to the ETS is the Bible in its original manuscripts is in error. Of course, it's like, well, it's how do you flesh out inerrancy? So we're like, yeah, we can agree with that. And they're like, no, you can't. So there was a year-long inquiry. The board of that investigated us. And the recommendation was that Pinnock be allowed to remain and I be excluded from membership. And it was because of one answer when we were in the meetings that Clark said, I don't know. And me and my youth at that time, I'm like, well, here's what I would say. And they did not like it. They said, well, how can you preach then that this is going to happen if the Bible says this is going to happen? And so it came to a vote, and 1/3 of the membership present at that meeting voted to expel Pinnock, and 2/3 voted not to expel him. And I think it was 64% of the members present voted to expel me from membership, but they needed 66%. So as soon as the votes were
So
tallied,
somebody gets on the phone and starts calling people,
yeah,
trying to get
yes,
two more votes.
I need we need 14 more votes. Find them anywhere
Right?
you can. Um, Norman Geisler, who was sitting in the front row, stood up and walked out. He had said, if this vote fails, I'm leaving the ETS.
Wow.
And Roger Nicole came up to me afterwards and said, he's a founding member. And he said, nobody wants you here. Why do you come?
Jeez. Oh my God.
But anyway,
Oh,
so the vote failed, but I didn't feel at home there. But I was seeking to Pinnock and I were both seeking to reform evangelical theology and keep it from becoming fundamentalism.
mm-hmm.
But in retrospect, we and many others, Greg Boyd, Roger Olson,
Yeah.
lots of good people tried to reform,
Yeah.
keep evangelicalism from becoming fundamentalists.
Yeah.
I think we failed.
I think
We
so
did not
too.
succeed.
Especially if you look at where my Southern Baptist brothers and sisters are
Yes.
going. I was ordained
Yeah.
Southern Baptist.
Okay.
Went to Baylor and Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, and
Okay. Yeah.
was very, very connected to that world. But I was a little bit too charismatic for them, John.
Okay.
So I got turned down for church planting because I was a little too charismatic
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
the time. Now I would just be way too progressive.
Yeah.
But any rate, well, so the God Who Risked, one of my mentors was a guy named John Wimber.
Okay.
You ever hear
Yeah.
of John Wimber
Oh yeah. Oh
and
yeah.
the Vineyard Movement? Yeah,
Yeah.
I kind of got, because I was a little too charismatic for the Southern Baptist, but I was not a Pentecostal in my theology. So Vineyard was kind of this magic middle, so to
Okay.
speak. And had sort of a evangelical theology with a charismatic Pentecostal practice. But John Wimber used to always say faith is spelled R-I-S-K.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the God who risks, immediately I kind of like that title.
Yeah.
I like that title. And you were really attempting, in my view, to sort of, it's so challenging because like the word evangelical today has lost its meaning for me. Like I wouldn't call myself an evangelical anymore
Right.
because
Right.
of
Right.
where that term has landed. And it's had a meaning that's been in flux for some time, I think, right? But like you said, you tried to keep it away from fundamentalism and you failed. I think these two terms, sovereign and providence, could equally fall into those categories. I mean, in my mind, I don't even hardly use those terms anymore because of the baggage that's
Right.
connected to them. But
Right.
you did a great job at trying to sort of redefine from and you use kind of like, in my mind, you use Wesleyan's quadrilateral
Yes.
approach for
Yes.
your theological ground rules. So you wanted to lean heavily into scripture, heavily into Christian tradition, heavily into reason, and heavily into sort of a pragmatic
Right.
experiential component as well.
Yeah.
And also, I also like the fact that you dove into the language a little bit and the philosophy of language and how language is really metaphorical and
Yeah.
symbolic and all those kind of things as well. So even language is a slippery slope a bit. But
Mhm.
and then you went into Old Testament, you went into New Testament, you went into Christian tradition, and I mean you did a great job building a lot of groundwork for trying to maintain sort of a very biblical Christian history approach to this idea of a God who's not the classical theist God of the Greek philosophy world, and quite frankly, most of our Christian world. But you
Mhm.
did bring out how the Christian tradition hasn't always viewed God in those kind of
Right.
frameworks and categories. And describe for listeners, assuming they don't know, they're not theologians and all that kind of stuff. What is it about this approach to God that involves risk? What is God risking
Okay.
with creation and humanity,
Yeah.
and why is your view different from sort of like mainstream evangelical views now, or even
Yeah.
mainstream, probably even mainstream, even some of the Catholic concepts of God
Yeah.
can fall
Yeah.
into those
Yes.
worlds
So
as well.
conservative Catholicism affirms what's called classical theism.
Right.
And for our audience, classical theism is the idea that God is not influenced by anything other than God. So you and I, our prayers, our actions never affect or influence God in any respect.
And the classical term for that is that immu-
So
it's non
there's two terms, two
yeah,
terms.
impasse and immutable.
Impassibility,
Yeah.
which simply means God is not affected by any creaturely action.
Okay.
And strong immutability, which means God never changes in any respect.
Anyway.
Not like God's plans never change, God's thoughts never change, God's emotions never change. God never changes in any respect. Now, when I was an evangelical, a lot of evangelicals did not affirm those ideas,
Mm-hmm.
particularly your Assemblies of God, Pentecostal background is like, well, of course, God's affected by our prayers and what we do.
Yeah.
That's just
We're
part of the
praying for
piety.
healing, we're prophesying, we're doing all these
Yes.
things, and yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's part of the piety. So if you've been brought up with that kind of piety, then that view doesn't really make sense to you. But evangelicalism in the United States has been deeply influenced by the Puritan strand of evangelicalism and the Wesleyan strand. But the Wesleyan strand has been pushed down uh, by major publications and universities and seminaries associated with evangelicalism. The Calvinists basically have controlled that narrative. And Pinnock and I were a
Just
couple
for
of
the
great
audience,
boys.
real
Oh,
quickly. Like if you go back to Calvin, there was a guy named Joseph Arminius
yes,
who pushed more into the free will
right,
worldview versus the sovereignty of God worldview.
right.
That debate has been going on now ever since, right? So
Yeah. So one of the things I say in the Guide to Risk is that the what are called the early Christian writers, often called the early Christian fathers, but I call them early Christian writers, for the first 3 centuries, all affirmed what we call free will.
mm,
They're just and so if you read them, they all say, well, of course, God doesn't get everything God wants. God just can't control, and you have free will. Those don't go together. And then you get to the fourth century thinker named Augustine or Augustine, and he says, no, 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 God gets whatever God wants, period. And if you look in the Eastern Orthodox tradition, they think Augustine went off the deep end.
yeah,
And there was a guy, a theologian named Vincent of Lorenz, who has a motto in Latin that comes out in English as what has been believed by all Christians in all places at all times. And he wrote that against Augustine.
mm,
Most people don't realize that I actually had that quoted against me once, for being an open theist. Like, well, this hasn't been believed by all people all times. I'm like, that started with Augustine's theological determinism. And they were saying this is an innovation.
yeah,
But that innovation deeply affected the Roman Catholic Church and then Luther and Calvin in Protestantism, and then through the Puritans in the United States.
yeah. And to jump on your original comment about Greek philosophy, Augustine would have been more of a Platonist,
Yes, he affirmed a lot of Platonism,
and then
but
and
Plato
then
himself,
tell,
Plato himself though, is not easy to pin down. He's got statements
yeah, yeah,
that he says even God can't uh, control this.
mm-hmm.
So it's
Years
really
later, I
Augustine.
think years later, Thomas Aquinas would have been a bit more Aristotelian, at least leaning one
Right,
way or the other,
right.
right? But these
Yeah,
are two Greek philosophers that had ideas of perfection
right,
categories,
right,
right? Of God, of whatever
right.
God, however they define God, kind of a thing.
Yes. So Plato has an argument from perfection, and it goes very simply like this. A divine being who's perfect could never change because any change could only be a change for the worse. If you're perfect, you can only get worse. You can't get better. And that idea deeply influenced Augustine. But Augustine was also influenced by uh, the doctrine of original sin, that we didn't have free will anymore, and humans didn't have free will, that
Did
we have to
do
pass
you
through.
think he would have originated the at least the the exegesis around that idea? I wouldn't. That's the bad term for that. But
Yeah.
would
So I'm not saying Augustine
he
came up with
expounded
the
on that
idea,
idea? Where did that
but
idea?
so it's in the waters at his time period, but he's the one who brings it together and
Okay.
coalesces different
Yeah.
ideas. Like, well, why do we baptize children? Well, it has to be because they don't have a choice. Um, and he read Psalm 51, 3, against you, and in sin did my mother conceive me.
Yeah.
And he's going, well, and then he read Jerome's mistranslation
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
Romans,
Colgate.
where he says, so all sinned in Adam. And like, no, it doesn't say that in the Greek. Um, so Augustine was putting these ideas together.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, so sin has totally incapacitated our ability to respond to God's grace.
Mm-hmm.
And the early church fathers were all saying, well, God gives grace, and then you respond to it. But it's your response, and God doesn't control your response. And Augustine changed that. And he says, no, no, no. God decides how each individual will either accept God's grace or reject God's grace. And it's God's decision whether you accept or reject.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was the innovation. I'm just explaining some of the reasons
Yeah.
why Augustine gave for that innovation. But that was a big innovation in the church. And it led us, in my opinion, in a very bad direction. And much evangelical theology in the United States is now dominated by what I call theological determinist views. And in that view, God doesn't take any risks.
Mm-hmm.
because God's controlling everything.
Yep.
But if you go back to the early Christian writers before Augustine, and then, as you said, Arminius, and then you get the Wesleyan tradition, the Pentecostal tradition, the Eastern Orthodox tradition, they all agree. And I call the Eastern Orthodox, Pentecostal, Wesleyan, Arminian, I call them the free will tradition,
Mm-hmm.
which is the dominates, the most populous view in the history of Christianity. And that says God takes risks.
Yeah.
Because you can't control free will. You just can't do that.
Yeah.
It's impossible. It's logically impossible. And then we get into people say, well, God can do the logically impossible. And I ask those people, so can God save you and damn you simultaneously? It's a logical impossibility, but you just said God can do that,
Mm.
which makes no sense.
Mm.
Okay, saving you and damning you simultaneously makes no sense.
Yeah.
So I do think that one of the parameters of legitimate theology is our theology does have to make sense.
Mm.
Now, it doesn't mean you have all the answers
Right.
to every question. No, it just means that you can't contradict yourself.
Right. Yeah, you're trying to eliminate contradiction, not paradox or mystery.
Right. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I want to, gosh, so much in that book, but like for those of you who would consider yourself conservative theologians, conservative evangelicals, or even, even questioning those things, and you want to really dive in deeply to this topic, I mean, the footnotes alone are a third of the book, right? And
Yes.
you can do a deep dive by reading this book and checking out the footnotes. Super good analysis there. But I want to move into the embracing prodigals because so fascinating. There's a guy that's a pediatrician that did his doctoral work with Tom Ward recently, named Chris Hansen. He's in Memphis, and he wrote this book called Open and Relational Parenting. It just came out last year, and we interviewed him. And he actually referenced you in his work because he goes back to the paradigm that is it Diana Baumrind
Baumrind.
comes
Yep.
up with on
Yep.
these this paradigm for types of parenting,
Right.
and the poles being authoritative versus nurturing, and you kind of add into that authoritative, permissive, and nurturing as sort of the three categories. But you're dealing with the prodigal son story. You start off with that in the introduction, but then you kind of break it down into these into this typology of authoritative, permissive, and nurturing, and kind of analyze the prodigal son story through that lens. But what unfolds for you is a paradigm that you can literally, like, you're in this book, The God Who Risked, you're arguing for a nurturing God versus
Yes.
authoritative or permissive God.
Yeah. Yeah.
You point out George Lakoff's arguments. You go into politics right now in America, very much a paradigm between authoritarian type politics right now versus nurturing. Theology, authoritarian versus nurturing. Parenting, authoritative versus nurturing. I mean, there's so many contexts in which this paradigm influences the way we human beings live, how we understand God, how we understand parenting, how we understand the world works, how we understand morality, all these kind of things. So I'm curious, what first prompted you to think through the prodigal story through this lens? Who did you first read that clicked off these ideas?
Yeah.
Was it Lakoff or was it somebody else?
I can see his face, and he teaches his philosophy at Messiah College. I've lost his name right now. But he wrote a little piece on the prodigal son, and he said, well, it could go like this. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is brilliant. Um, maybe his name will come to me in a second here, but um, uh, uh, and I had been reading Lakoff. So the bridge between The God Who Risks and this book was a Wycliffe Bible translator came up to me when I was being tried at the Evangelical Theological Society and says, well, do you realize that it's your view of metaphor that is really different from these Calvinists' view of metaphor? And I said, what?
Say that again for my sake.
Yeah. So he said I had a different view of metaphor than Roger Nicole, Norman Geisler, um, uh, Bruce Ware, and oh, who's the president of Southern Baptist Seminary in Louisville?
Al Mohler.
Al Mohler. Al
Yeah.
Mohler. He goes, you have a different view of metaphor. He says, you actually affirm what's called conceptual metaphor theory. I said, I've never heard of it.
Okay.
He then sent me all this stuff to read, and it was by Lakoff.
Okay.
And so I spent the next 6 years really learning what's called cognitive linguistics.
Yeah.
And then I applied cognitive linguistics to theology in this book called Theology in the Flesh,
Okay.
how human embodiment actually shapes the way we think about things.
Okay.
And that's where then I saw Lakoff's two cognitive models and Baumrinn's theory and stuff.
Yeah.
And then some friends, colleagues at Hendrix, which was a wonderful place to teach at, in political science, started giving me materials. And I'm like, oh, all this makes so much sense of what's going on here. And I said, well, this explains what's going on in Christianity in the United States.
Mm.
And so that's when I just put all those ideas together in political science, sociology, and psychology, and the prodigal son. And like, this is how I want to begin the book, with 4 different ways of telling the prodigal son story.
It's so
And I
fascinating.
think they just make sense.
It
Like, you can
does.
tell it this way, and like, oh yeah, you can see a parent doing that.
So let's do that. Let's play that out a little bit
Okay,
for our listeners. Yeah.
okay,
Because, by the way, I've been in recovery now for about 7 years. I work with people without addicts and alcoholics every week of my life, lead groups, all that kind of stuff. And 50% of the people who come to a 12-step group, about 50% are agnostic or atheist.
okay,
And the reason why is because they've been exposed to an authoritative God, punishing God that they
yeah,
don't want to have anything to do
yeah,
with. And so, there's some real pragmatic work that goes on in the world through these very different lenses of God.
yeah.
I had one friend say, some gods deserve to die.
Yes, yes,
and this is the bandwagon I'm on right now, John.
yeah,
So I appreciate you so
yeah,
much because you've done such a great job. But yeah, let's talk about the prodigal. If the father was an authoritarian father or a permissive father, how would the story go?
okay,
And then let's tell it from a
yeah.
nurturing perspective.
So there's in the parenting typology, there's 4 types. So
Yeah.
we'll start with the easy one, the distant parent, who is neither affirming, like, hey, I'm with you, I'm for you, let's go, I'll help, um, nor demanding, like no expectations. The kid, no, you do your homework or not, I don't care. So the prodigal takes his share of the inheritance, goes off, squanders it, um, and says, wow, this is bad. Maybe if I go home, my father will hire me as a hired servant, but I can't be a son anymore. I've shamed the family. So it comes back and says, I'm not worthy to be called your son. And the father says, whatever. Yeah,
Oh well.
yeah. Not like glad you're back or you brought just whatever. Okay, so that's the easy one. The the permissive parent is affirming, but has no expectations, is not demanding. This is I'm using the parenting and child educator Diana Baumrin's terminology here.
Mhm.
So the permissive father says to the son, "Oh, whatever you do is okay, man. I'm always behind you. It just doesn't matter. Whatever you do, I'm affirming of you. I accept you, period. Glad you're back." It's like, oh, well, okay, that's good. But no expectations. There's no assessment of like, you really screwed up and you need to change. I want to help you change. It's like, yeah, it's just I affirm you, I accept you. So it's good on that, but there's nothing on the, well, how are we going to transition out of this way of life? The authoritative parent is highly demanding, has high expectations, but is low on affirmation and empowerment. So this father, when the son says, "I'm not worthy to be called your son, make me as one of your hired servants," and the father says, "Well, you got that right. You are not worthy. You have brought shame on me and the family, and you don't deserve to be called my son." And he says, "Oh, yeah, there's a passage in Exodus that says you can be a slave for 6 years and work off your debt to the family. So you do that, and we'll see if we can bring you back in to be called a son or not."
Mhm.
Um, so the authoritative father is very demanding, but doesn't affirm the son. Now, the nurturant parent is both highly affirming and highly demanding. So, yes, I want you to do your homework, but I'm going to give you what you need to uh, confidence, etc. I'm here to help you. I want to, but yes, I want you to do these things and succeed well. So the nurturing parent is this really the story that Jesus tells. And while the son has said, not worthy, comes back home, and the father sees him a long ways off. And instead of sitting at the house, the father runs to meet the son on the road. And the son says, "I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me as one of your hired servants." And the father tells the servants, "The kid needs shoes. He needs a robe. And let's have a party." Why? He says, "My son was dead." So the father gives an assessment of the son's background, but he also says the son was lost and is found, was dead and is alive. Um, so the father realizes that the son is in a bad situation and wants to help him improve his life. The question is how best to help the person improve. The authoritative father says judgment and demanding and punishment. That's the way you get people to change and become better people. And the nurturant parent says assessment. You have to correctly assess the person, where they're at, what their needs are, what they've done wrong. Okay, they're not perfect, but it's the affirmation then that empowers them to want to change. So it's forgiveness first, embracing first. That's why it's the father embraces the son. So the book is called Embracing Prodigals.
Mm.
Father embraces the son. That comes first. Acceptance comes first. Wanting change and having the expectations comes second. But the authoritative father, no, 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 no. You change first, then I'll think about forgiving you.
Mhm.
So it's a very different emphasis. Both involve forgiveness, both involve expectations and demands, but it's the order and ranking of them that's very uh,
Yeah.
polar to each other.
Yeah. So you give a little. You did this at the retreat at the conference that we were at a couple of
Yeah.
weeks ago too, but in the book as well, Embracing Prodigals, you give just a short little assessment. If you had to pick between independence
Oh, yeah.
or respect for elders,
Yeah. Yeah.
if you had to pick between good manners or curiosity,
Yeah.
if you had to pick between well behaved or being considerate, and if you had to pick between self reliance or obedience.
Yeah.
Very simple little
Yes.
test, but each of these words represents one set of values that would more correspond to authoritative.
Right.
The other set would correspond more to nurturing.
Yes. So take the last one, self-reliance or obedience. So authorities are very big on obedience. Okay. The Bible's God's rule book. You obey it. You don't question God. Like once at a conference, we're going back to J.I. Packer. I asked Packer about prayer, and he pointed his finger at me and said, "Who do you think you are to advise God?" I'm a nobody. But God invites me to respond and say, this is what I want or whatever. But in the nurturing, God wants people who are self-reliant, who can take care of themselves and reach out and help others. For the authoritative, it's you just follow the rules, kid. Shut up. We've already set out the rules. Like one sweet lady told me when I was a pretty young student, she said, we don't need theologian. We've already got it figured out. We just need people who know how to speak it in a new language for young people. You don't change the rules.
Yeah.
It's all there.
Yep. Yep.
And for the authoritative, you don't want independent-minded people.
Right. Yeah. You want people
so
thinking outside the box.
Yeah. So what happens with people who are raised in authoritarian parenting, coaching styles, teaching styles, is they can't think for themselves. They have to have an external guidebook that tells them what to do in this situation.
Yeah.
And it's not like, so what would, the prophet Samuel do in this situation? And think creatively.
Yeah.
What would Jesus do in this situation? And think creatively, because Jesus didn't face this situation. So what should I do here? It's like, tell me what I'm supposed to do.
It's interesting too. Years ago, there was a documentary that came out on Netflix about, I can't remember, it had the F-bomb in it and fathers coupled up, because it was a documentary on punk rock singers, like punk rock stars, who were basically like anarchist rule breakers.
Yes.
And then they become fathers. And like Flea was, he's one of the famous guitarists for Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Okay.
Flea's one of the characters in this thing. And he was like an anarchist. He wanted to break every rule that existed. And then he's a dad, and he becomes an authoritarian dad. And almost every one of them turned into authoritarian dads who were complete rule breakers as kids. Is so fascinating. I mean, think about our current president.
Yeah.
I mean, he broke every rule in the business book and got away with it. But now he expects complete loyalty and authority with his you can't verge from him 1% and be his friend.
No.
You know what I'm saying? Like, but if you look at how he lived his life, he was a rule breaker.
Yeah.
But now he's in power. He's like, now it has to be his way or the highway.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to think through so many aspects of our society right now through these lenses, I think.
Yeah.
From your view of God to your view of parenting to your view of politics anyway. You've done that in the embracing Prodigals. You even dive into you have a chapter on politics even, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. What a fascinating thing to think through. And the thing I appreciated about this paradigm is that the people who want the authoritative side, it's not like they have a set of values that are completely ridiculous.
Oh, right.
You know what I mean? Like when you hear the core values, you're kind of like going, well, yeah, I can get that. I respect for elders. Sure.
Obedience. Yeah.
I mean, within, I've always been a little bit of a prodigal, so, I've always been willing to go outside the box. So that's why I've been in 3 or 4 different denominations in my career, I think. But yeah, what's your what do you think about where we're at right now, John? And like what think about white evangelicals right now have voted for Trump, who's an authoritarian. I think 81% in 2016, basically the same
Right,
percentage in 2020,
right,
and
right.
basically the same percentage in 2024.
It actually went up.
Did it go up some in
Yeah,
2024?
yeah. And part of the reason for that is because people who um, are like, this is incongruent. We can't vote for Trump and support these values. I'm out of here. They left evangelicalism. So evangelicalism has become much more homogenous, authoritarian.
Because people like me have
That's
exited.
right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
And even people who aren't progressive. So I have former colleagues who are not progressive. They
Yeah.
never use that, that term.
Yeah. Yeah.
But nonetheless say,
You might as well call
this
yourself
is,
a communist.
yeah, they're just saying, this is crazy. What are we doing here? And they had to leave their church. They had to leave um, their place of employment because people are saying, oh, so we can't trust you.
Wow. Yeah.
You're not following, you're questioning our leaders who have laid down, this is what we're doing, this is who we're voting for, and you're questioning that? Well, then you're not really one of us.
Yeah.
So they had to leave. So even people like that have left evangelicalism. So when the pollsters interview, it's predominantly uh, a strongly authoritative or authoritarian um, white evangelicalism. And if you bring in black evangelicalism, which theologically agrees so much, their view of the Bible, even views of hell, etc.
Mhm.
Um, but Christian Smith, who is a really well-known sociologist of religion in America, and particularly of evangelicalism in America. Christian Smith wrote a seminal article in which he pointed out that white evangelicals don't think black evangelicals are really Christian.
Because they vote Democratic largely.
That's right.
Yeah.
And they don't follow through on their authoritative values
Yeah.
because the black church is much more communitarian and we rely on each other. We need each other to make it in life.
Yeah.
And white evangelicalism is strongly individualistic. No,
Yeah.
no, no. You are
Yeah.
responsible. And if you don't either get a job that provides health insurance or you get a job that makes enough money that you can buy your own health insurance, well, why should anybody give you health insurance?
Right.
So
Yeah.
strongly authoritative.
The largest historically black church here in Kansas City is pastored by a dear friend of mine, and we used to trade pulpits when I was at my big church, and he did his Master of Divinity at Midwestern Baptist Theological Seminary,
Okay. Yeah.
and so his congregation would probably vote almost 100% Democrat, has for years. Women can't preach in his church. They're not pro LGBTQ plus, right? They definitely preach a bit more of a Billy Graham gospel versus a social gospel, which is the black churches are a little bit different on that. Some of them are more social justice gospel oriented, and some of them are a little bit more Billy Graham justice oriented. And some of them mix them both well, but yeah, it's so fascinating that, like, my Southern Baptist denomination that I grew up in and was ordained in, they agree on so many things: inerrancy of Scripture, women can't preach, they're not pro LGBTQ plus, but bang, when it comes to politics, Southern Baptists are voting for Trump, and they've white patriarchy. Rules. Here's another curiosity, John, since you're such a good historian. When I was at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, I studied with a guy named William Estep, and I'm a history buff. And Estep taught all the Reformation classes, and he was one of the foremost historians in Anabaptist history.
Okay.
He wrote the Anabaptist story. He had translated the Schleitheim Confessions. He had written a biography on Balthasar Hubmaier. He had written a history book on Renaissance and Reformation. So I learned separation of church and state through Dr. Estep, through the lens of the Anabaptist movement. And people in America, I pastored one of the largest churches in Kansas City for a long time. People in America, evangelicals in America, are completely ignorant of the difference between the magisterial Reformation and the Anabaptist Reformation, the radical. And if you draw a line from the Anabaptist Reformation to the Constitution of the United States, the Baptists kind of had some influence in that, Roger, back in the early colonial days, right? If you even read some of the state constitutions that were written prior to the forming of the United States, you can see the influence of some of the Anabaptists, like in a few of like in Pennsylvania and some of the colonies, right? And isn't that fascinating that now we've come to a place where all of a sudden we want a king again to emphatically enforce Christianity in America, so to speak? This is the umbrella which I hear people like. They don't care about democracy anymore. No. They want Christian values to be forced down people's throats. If we can't get our way democratically, then we're going to do it through a king. Right. Well, in that, you go back to the magisterial Reformation, you got Christians killing Christians in the name of Jesus.
Yes. Yeah, you have
the wrong view. The Anabaptists, because they got killed by everybody, and they were the only ones that took Jesus' teaching seriously and didn't take up arms and fight back, Crazy.
Yeah. So the authoritative value set that is in Calvin and Luther, and the nurturing value set of the Anabaptists.
Yeah.
And Luther maybe is a bit of a mix, but
definitely
a lot of his writings are strongly authoritative. So when it comes to people in the United States, so let me just give you a little background. So in 2015, I was thinking about this book, Embracing Prodigals. And my family are like, why are all these evangelicals supporting this guy named Trump? And I said, oh, it makes perfect sense. And then people looked at me like I would just come from outer space or something. What do you mean it makes perfect sense? I said, no. They should vote for Trump. Like, what? No. And I said, no, I think they should, given their values. And so when you look at their view of God, who is, it's my way or the highway. I've laid out the rules for salvation. You don't follow the rules, you go to eternal conscious torment, okay? It's strong punishment. Their view of hell. Their view of what the Bible is and how the Bible works, it's a set of rules. And like the pastor who said to me, why did you, Sanders, put a question mark where God put a period? That kind of thinking. And their view of atonement with penal substitution.
Yeah.
And somebody's got to be punished. There's no free lunch here, buddy. Somebody's got to be punished.
Yeah.
And I was putting all this together, like, well, it makes complete sense why they would support this strongly authoritarian guy, and why they would go soft on, small d democracy, because small d democracy says we should have multiple voices and we have to listen to people and we have to compromise. No, we don't have to compromise. It's God's way or the highway.
Yeah.
And so on all these social and political issues, and the Tea Party, when it was big, there's no compromise. Compromise is a 4-letter word.
Yeah. Right.
So we don't have to listen to that Black community. We don't have to listen to the Hispanic community. We don't have to listen. And now Democrats, they're just, the new term is unhuman.
I heard this recently.
Yeah. So once you say they're not even human because they're against
that Stephen Miller. I think that was Stephen Miller, wasn't it?
Yes, it's Stephen Miller.
Yeah.
And there's a book by Otten that said that Miller was endorsing.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. I can't remember what the book was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so what they're saying is nurturance do not support true human values. What are the true human values? Authoritarian values. These are the only true and good human values. If you're not an authoritarian, then you're trying to destroy the human race. Now, to me, that makes sense with a strong authoritarian mindset.
Yeah.
Like, yeah,
With the
it's their way
yeah.
or the highway, and their God is just like that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I'm into uncontrolling love these days, John. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And I really went through a meltdown, as you heard. You heard a
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
bit of my story, and I've been an open book about all that with people. But yeah, I just when if a God who's in control of everything, and then you just connect the dots to evil, it's just a monster God to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't. It's just like, why would you want to worship a God who would send one of his kids to an eternal torment?
Yeah.
Like, would you light your kid on fire for all eternity and punish him forever for something he didn't believe right? Or he questioned, or he didn't behave right? Like, what parent in the world would do that? And yet this is the God that so many people cling to so desperately.
Yeah. I think John Piper would.
Well, and his son, have you heard his son's stuff?
No,
He has a
I've heard
son
about it, but I haven't.
who has a podcast who basically is not anywhere close to where his dad's
Right.
at.
Right. But
I think his
I think,
name's John. Anyway, yeah.
yeah. So John Piper, if the audience may not know, he's a Calvinist pastor in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and yeah, he's critiqued several of my books. He just rejects them, and because it's nurturant values, and he thinks I've got a misinformed view of God and misinformed view of the Bible, etc. Okay, but for him, yes, it would be the loving thing to do to send his son to hell.
Wow. Yeah,
And like, so John, here's one of my favorite quotes of John Wesley when he was looking at Calvinism in his day and Whitfield stuff.
yeah, yeah.
And Wesley said, quote, "If that's love, it's a love that makes your blood run cold."
It's so true.
Yeah.
It isn't love in my book at all. It's the
No.
opposite.
So for our audience, one of the things I point out in Embracing Prodigals is that authoritators and nurturants have different definitions of love.
Yeah.
It's not that one has love and the other doesn't. They have different definitions of love.
Mm.
And then they often pit love and justice against each other.
Mm.
But nurturants and authoritators also have different definitions of justice.
Yeah.
So it's not that like one side loves justice and puts it over love, and the other side puts love over justice. It's that they have two different definitions of love and two different definitions of justice.
Mm-hmm.
And those are colliding. Now, I saw this my whole theological career, dealing with these Calvinists all the time, evangelicalism. So we're not talking about the same things when we talk about love.
Right.
You can say everybody. So in the book, one of the things sociologists point out is that in America, it's like 86% of the people will say, well, of course God's loving.
Yeah.
But then they have different definitions of love.
Understandings. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've actually I support a ministry here in Kansas City called Center for Conflict Resolution, which is a restorative justice movement.
Yes.
You have punitive justice, distributive justice, right. But I really like what the restorative justice movement is doing right now. And we work with people who have been incarcerated and coming out. And actually, even the 12-step movement is very much a nurturing movement. The higher power, the only definition you really get is something that's greater to you, that's loving and caring.
Yeah.
But then at the core of the 12 steps is a rigorous honesty, a rigorous moral assessment, and then you make amends and you go, and it's very much rooted in the restorative justice movement as well. So there's still responsibility, there's still making amends, but there's beautiful forgiveness and love and restoration. no matter how far off the how far off the rails people have gotten. It's really amazing. And to me, that's the heart of the gospel that I want to be about the rest of my life. And yeah. Well, brilliant book. I love it. Highly recommend Embracing Prodigals. It's easily one of my favorite Jesus stories, that and the Good Samaritan probably. And I love the way you come up with this lens of, using this paradigm to analyze that story and then apply it to so many different areas. So we have run out of time, John, but thank you. Thank you for all your work. Thank you for putting up with all the criticisms you've gone through. I know that can, at some point you can laugh about it, but there's times when it hurts, right? There's times when friends and loved ones, I know those arrows, and they can hit hard and go deep. So thank you for being a torch bearer for love and nurturing views of God and the church, the world, and Jesus. I love it. Thank you so much for doing that. Obviously, you can go to, you get your books on, however you buy your books, at your local bookstore or Amazon or whatever. But what's your website?
So it's drjohnsanders.com. So it's drjohnsanders.com.
Okay.
And there you will see the things I've written about and try to introduce them in a more popular way, and answer questions that people have asked. Well, what about this then? How do you talk to authoritarians? So I've tried to address a lot of that on my website. So
excellent.
Anyway.
Yeah. So check out the website, check out the books. If you just read one book, I would recommend this one. Embracing Prodigals. Very, very well done. So thanks again for being here. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Hey, you made it to the end. Thanks for listening all the way through on this episode. By the way, if you're not already a supporter, go to spiritualityadventures.com, sign up for one of our monthly supports, and you will receive our bonus content. You'll receive lots of interesting information about our guests. Many of our musicians will do special bonus songs and record a song. So I want to encourage you to do that. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Be sure and subscribe. Be sure and share any of the episodes that you like. And be sure and make comments if you like them as well. This helps us get Spirituality Adventures out there to more listeners, more watchers. So whatever platform you're using, subscribe, like, share, make comments, and go to our website, sign up for our team, and be a part of the team support. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.